Guys, it's been a while since we've done a video here in the studio because this is the first time I've been home in about 2 weeks. Last week, obviously, was Thanksgiving. I was down in Georgia with my family. And before that, I was in Denver at the Society for Biblical Literature's annual meeting. And that is what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, if you notice my somewhat raspy voice, I am going to be drinking a little bit of hot tea here. This is not a prop. I'm actually drinking tea from our Disciple Dojo Old Testament timeline mug. It's so handy. One, because I have a gross, scratchy throat. And two, because I can get an overview of the entire Hebrew Bible timeline while I'm sipping my English breakfast tea with honey and almond milk. I know you were wanting to know what type of tea I drink. The reason I'm drinking this, by the way, is because going from Denver, where it's snow and ice, to South Georgia, where it's t-shirt and shorts weather, in the span of 2 days has thrown my sinuses for a loop. So I've been kind of congested and sinusy for the past couple of days. If you are also struggling with sinus junk, I recommend you to drink some hot tea with honey. And it's even more healing when drunk from a Disciple Dojo mug. Transparent marketing, but this channel doesn't have any sponsors. So if you would like to help support us, please, please, please subscribe. We're so close to hitting our goal. Our goal this year is 5,000 subscribers. We started the year with a little over 1,000 subscribers. So it's a really cool growth period that we've gone through in 2022. And we want to cap it off by hitting 5,000 at the end of the year. The second thing you can do to help us out is visit our Disciple Dojo store over on Zazzle.com. We've got a lot of gifts. We've got mugs like this. We've got shirts like the one I'm wearing that says "Books or Weapons in the War of Ideas." This is based on an old World War II wartime printing design, and the little dojo samurai right there in the middle. We are a huge believer in that here at Disciple Dojo. Books are weapons, and I am surrounded by them, as you can see, and we're going to be talking about more in this video. But if you want to get this or some of our other designs that we have, take a look. Everything purchased really helps us out. And I said there was two. I lied. There's actually three things you can do. Our entire ministry is donor supported, and one of the biggest things that we need to keep going are end of the year donations. Our monthly donors are great, but end of the year donations really help us fund everything for the next year. We've hired an assistant instructor to help with our refugee jitsu program. We've upgraded things in the studio. We've sent me to biblical conferences. We've done a lot this year to help this ministry grow. And there's some really cool stuff planned for the coming year, which I'll get to in just a minute. But we can't do any of this without tangible monthly support and year-end gifts. So please, if you have enjoyed this channel, give whatever you can. I'm not going to sit here and say God's going to bless you 100-fold. I'm not asking you to sow your seed into this ministry if you want to receive God's blessings. None of that nonsense, heretical garbage. I'm simply saying we can't do this without regular monthly donors and without year-end gifts. So that's the appeal, straightforward. We need your support. We'd love for you to come on board as a dojo donor. So the annual meeting of the Society for Biblical Literature happened 2 weeks ago in Denver. The annual meeting for SBL is one of the largest, if not, it might be the largest gathering of biblical scholars in the world. It meets once a year, and it's a place where everyone in the world of biblical scholarship basically can get together and listen to papers being presented, can have their work critiqued, their points challenged. They can raise questions to people's work, connect with colleagues, talk about upcoming projects, and just get together in person. That's what a conference is. So think of like Comic-Con, but instead of Star Wars and Star Trek nerds running around in cosplay, it's biblical scholarship nerds running around in tweed jackets with leather patches on the sleeve. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think I saw anybody wearing actual tweed jackets with leather patches on the sleeve. But you get the idea. It's Biblical Scholarship Convention. And this year, your boy was there. So this was my name tag on the lanyard. Got to wear this. around all weekend, and there were even 3 little color-coded dots. This green dot is the you can handshake, you can give a hug, I'm fine with personal contact. But since this is the first meeting back since COVID, there were dots for people who would rather keep a respectful distance and others who were avoiding contact altogether, because that's the post-pandemic world we live in. But most people were so excited to be back that they were all about hugs and handshakes. So I wanted to just give you a little bit of what it was like from my perspective, from someone who, while a member of SBL, I'm not a published scholar. I only have my MDiv. I'm not a THM or a PhD. And my role there, I view it as taking Disciple Dojo viewers into the world of biblical scholarship, being a bridge between the academy and you, those of you that are really interested about the Bible, whether in academic or just interested lay people capacity. So I got there on Friday around lunchtime. The session I was going to go to was later that afternoon. And it gave me enough time to drop my stuff in the room and head over to the convention center. The convention center in downtown Denver, by the way, is massive. It's like a little city. I don't know how many square blocks it takes up, but it's huge. It's so big it even has a giant blue bear peering into the windows. But alongside of SBL's annual meeting was the gathering of IBR. IBR is the Institute for Biblical Research. I'm not technically a member of IBR, though I'm going to be in the process of becoming what's called a friend of IBR sometime next year. But IBR is a gathering of biblical scholars who are not, how we put it, not quite as conservative as ETS, but not quite as sometimes wacky as SBL. SBL's, you got everybody there. I mean, literally all of biblical academia is included in SBL. So you don't even know what religion the person you're dealing with is. So IBR is for those kind of broader, but still somewhat evangelical Orthodox biblical scholars to get together and exchange ideas and to work on projects and to host different sessions. So my first session I went to was on hermeneutics and the Middle East. It's hosted by the group within IBR that's trying to get people on different sides, particularly the Israeli-Palestinian issue, together in the same room, having the hard conversations that need to be had that can in some way generate more light than heat in what is already an overheated debate. So this session was really good. There were 4 presentations, 2 that would be considered something of Christian Zionist or a modified Christian Zionist approach, and 2 that would be from a modern pro-Palestinian or critical of the Israeli government approach, but all within the umbrella of Christians committed to biblical authority and living out the gospel, even in the face of major conflict. There was time for Q&A. There was time for the presenters to respond to one another. Not enough time. There never is enough time, especially when it's a topic of that magnitude. But it was really good. And I got to connect with the presenters and with participants there because, Dojo viewers, you may know that is an issue that I am very passionate about, is being light in the darkness and working for peace in the Holy Land between Palestinians and Israelis. So I knew I had to go to this session. I was glad that I did. And then right after that, this is on Friday night, was kind of the final event of IBR, or the crowning event. And that was the big Friday night presentation hosted by Zondervan. And the keynote presenter that night was my friend David De Silva. He presented a wonderful paper on how theologians have tended to distance what Paul kept intimately intertwined, which is justification and sanctification. David, like me, is Wesleyan Methodist, so it was great seeing Wesleyan theology up there on the main stage. And after his presentation, there were 2 response papers that were read, and then a time of Q&A. And that's really what happens at all the sessions at a Biblical Scholars Conference, at least all the ones that I took part in. You have a topic or a number of topics presented. You have a paper that read or sometimes presented. And then you have responses to that paper. And so it's all very academic. This is a chance to really get together, and instead of having to respond in print in a journal article that may not come out for weeks or months, you get to respond in the moment. Audiences get to ask questions. Speakers get to be pressed on issues. Very cordial, very polite. Nobody's throwing punches or anything, but it is academically rigorous in that regard. While I was there, I got to connect in person finally with somebody who's been a good friend of this channel for a while now. Gregory Richardson and I got to hang out. He is the Bible hacker and I'm going to put a link to his channel in the description below. If you haven't already subscribed, go give him a subscription. He's doing great stuff, and it was a joy to connect with my brother in person after being online friends for the past year and a half. One of the coolest things about going to SBL, IBR, is that you meet your bibliography, as our friend Carmen said in our last interview. I mean, I'm surrounded here at the Dojo Studio by commentaries, by monographs, journal articles, and walking around at this conference, I was seeing these people in person, and I was able to go up and talk to them. You know, I got to see Daniel Block again. It had been probably 12, 13 years since I saw him, and I went up to him and said, Dr. Block, you don't remember this at all, but a long time ago, this North Carolina ginger came up to Wheaton to talk to you about doing a PhD down the road and what would be needed. And you were so kind and so welcoming. And while I did not end up going that route, my good friend Carmen ended up becoming your student. And I just wanted you to know how much your work has meant to me over the years. That's really cool, being able to say that to someone face to face. I was able to go to Gordon Conwell's alumni breakfast the next morning. I got to talk to President Sundquist about what Disciple Dojo is doing, about what's going on with Gordon Conwell, the future of the seminary. And I even got to be back in the same room with my friend Esau McCulley. We looked at each other and he said, how long has it been since we've been in the same room? I said, I think it's literally been 20 years. I think 2002 was the last time we were hanging out. Esau looks exactly like he did in seminary. He has not seemed to age. Those are the kind of things. It's just cool getting to connect with people who you haven't seen in a long time or who you've never met in person, whose works have impacted you. That's the highlight of the conference. The papers that are presented, the sessions that are done, yeah, those are fine. Some of them are really entertaining and some of them are fascinating, and some of them, to be honest, they're just super boring. That all depends on the person presenting. There's an art to presenting a paper. I talked about this with my friend Richard Middleton. I spent a lot of time with him at the conference, and he talked about the difference between presenting a paper versus reading a paper. When you're presenting a paper live to an audience, you need to shorten your sentences. You need to speak as if you're speaking to the audience, not as if you're writing for a journal. Now, some people may frown on that. They don't think it's academic enough, but I guarantee you everybody in the room listening appreciates when someone presents a paper rather than just reads their paper. And I got to hear Richard present two papers. One was on a session about his book, Abraham's Silence. And then the other one was in the Biblical Hebrew Poetry session. I went to that, and Richard was one of, I think, 4 or 5 people that presented papers, and his was on Psalm 77. Now, his presentation on Psalm 77 was so good that he is coming back to the dojo next week. And you are going to get the Disciple Dojo version of what he presented at SBL on Psalm 77. Guys, it's going to be amazing. I was blown away by what he brings out of that psalm. So I'm excited for that. Stay tuned. That's coming up very soon. And speaking of Richard, one of the coolest things that he did for me is he had an extra ticket, a +1, to the Zondervan Authors Lunch. And he said, hey, do you want to go with me? I've got an extra ticket. Love to have you. I was so excited. It was the coolest thing. We get in there. It's this huge buffet. Now, I had already eaten because I didn't know that I was going to be going to this event. He kind of got in touch with me last minute and said, hey, do you have lunch plans? So I had already eaten a very overpriced sandwich from a vendor, but I went anyway just to go and to be in the room with, I joked on Instagram, 75% of what you see behind me, those authors were sitting there in that room having lunch together. It was so cool. First person we saw when Richard and I walked in and he started talking, Christopher J.H. Wright. Those of you that watch this channel, you know I have an unapologetic theological man crush on Christopher Wright. This is the second time I've got to meet him, and absolutely I said, I've got to get another selfie with you. It was just a pure joy to get to see him again, talk to him briefly, still working on getting him here on the dojo. It's kind of hard because he's over in the UK and he's also super busy, but hopefully we're going to make that happen at some point. But it was great just to be able to connect, to sit down at a table, look around, the person right next to you, their book is on this display stand upstairs, and the person on the other side, you've read their work for decades. And it was a who's who of biblical scholar authors, and it was amazing. The other thing that was amazing was the book exhibit. Now, let me just make sure you understand what I'm saying. This is not like a gift shop, something tacked on to the side of the conference where you can go and buy a few books. This is a full warehouse size book exhibit, rows and rows and rows of books by the publishers, all of them in the field of biblical scholarship. So imagine like a Books A Million or a Barnes & Noble, but without all the fluff, just all of it biblical, theological, nerdy goodness. And because it's SBL, everything was 40 to 80% off. Guys, I literally had to get another carry-on bag to come home because all the books I got. I bought over 50 pounds of books. Some of them I didn't pay anything for. Publishers were giving them away. Most of them were half price, if not more. It was book nerd heaven. So getting to not just browse the displays, but actually talk to the publishers, to the people that are there. I mean, this is the big event of the year for a lot of them. So I got to connect with the guy at Zondervan who oversees their Bible publishing. I got to talk to the people at Hendrickson. I got to talk to IVP. I got to talk to our friends at Glossa House. All of these biblical publishers, you get to actually make face-to-face connections with them. I got to tell them about Disciple Dojo. It was great. And I found out, little secret, the closer it gets to the end of the conference, Tuesday afternoon, the more likely a number of the publishers that are there are to severely reduce the price of their books because they have to ship or carry all of what they bring back. And a lot of them just don't want to do that. So here's an example. On the very last day, I just stopped by the Koren Publishers booth. This is a publishing house in Jerusalem. And they had this compact size English Tanakh translation, the Koren English Tanakh. And I was talking to the guy and it's like, you trying to get rid of everything, huh? He's like, yeah, I don't want to take it back. I have to fly it all back. So everything on the table, $5 each. So I got this, which I think it retails for about $30, $5. And I'm actually going to review this in an upcoming Bible review video because this is actually one of my favorite things that I picked up at SBL. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, this is just a little bit of what all was going on there. There were sessions running around the clock. There's actually an app on your phone that you download where you could build your schedule because it's not just like the events were just at the convention center. There were dozens of rooms in the convention center. There were rooms in other hotels across the street, a few blocks away. And so people were constantly going back and forth between different sessions. So there was an app that you download and you could build your schedule on the app. You could just search who are the people presenting papers, what are the topics I want to be at, find them in the app, and it would import it into a little custom schedule because it was such a massive conference. I think at this one, I heard there were maybe over 7,000 biblical scholars, which is down because of COVID. But before, I think it used to be around 12,000 or so. This is all what I was kind of hearing and picking up along the way in different conversations. Now, if you're interested in becoming a member of SBL, you can go to their website and you can see the membership requirements and you can apply. You pay your dues, you choose what level of membership fits you, and whether you want to receive the journal every quarter or not. SBL publishes the Journal for Biblical Literature. You can see them in videos back behind me sometimes. See that little stack of right there? Yeah, those are SBL journals. And they come out once a quarter, JBL, Journal of Biblical Literature. So once a quarter it comes out, and this is part of what you get as a member of SBL. Now, while I was there, I posted on YouTube and some of you answered. I said, hey, would any of y'all be interested in a video that just talks about the background? Enough of you said you would for me to make this video. I also asked if you had any questions and I'd be happy to answer them. So I want to read a couple of the questions and I'll answer them as they came in. One of the viewers said, in your interview with Carmen Joy Imes, it seemed like it would be impossible to attend every presentation. How did you navigate everything? Yes, you cannot attend every presentation. There are literally hundreds of them. You just can't. Physically, you can't. So what you do is you have to get the SBL handbook, either the print edition that they send out or digitally, and you go through and you look at the things that really interest you. In presenting papers, people are always coming and going. That was one of the things that was interesting is all the papers, it's not like it's this giant room where all the scholars are gathered. There are hundreds of rooms all over the place. I don't know if hundreds, but it seemed like hundreds. There were just rooms everywhere. And some of them would have 5 to 7 people in them. Some of them would have 50 to 100 people in them. It just depended on how popular the subject that was being presented was at any given moment. Most of the sessions were about 3 hours. and there would be multiple papers presented in those sessions. Somebody might want to be at so-and-so's presentation on this topic, but then they have another session where another person is giving a presentation on a topic that's germane to their studies. And so people would go in and out. You'd sit for one paper presentation, and then in between, people would get up and leave. Other people would come in. I mean, it was all done very casually, but it was just understood that people are always popping in and out because there are so many sessions that folks want to go to. So how I navigated it was I looked for names of people that I knew personally or whose work I had been impacted by over the years, and I found what sessions they were involved in. And then I left a huge chunk of my schedule open where I wasn't in any sessions. I was walking around the book exhibit, or I was having lunch or coffee with somebody who I had met and networking and connecting and talking about Disciple Dojo. I was sitting down, putting something in my backpack at one of the tables, and I looked over, and the guy that was sitting there, just minding his own business, was Craig Blomberg. So I went up and was like, Dr. Blomberg, I've been reading your work literally since college. He was so nice. We took a picture together, and it was just a really cool moment. But everyone is so approachable. And that alone made it worth keeping a somewhat flexible schedule, because you just never knew who you were going to run into, who you were going to connect with. One viewer says, book recommendations to look out for. There were so many books that I would recommend that were there, but I want to point out a few, not just because the books are good, but because the authors are doing amazing work and they're people I got to connect with personally, and I recommend their work to you. First recommendation, this is a small book. It's by Charlie Trim. He teaches out at Talbot School of Theology at the campus of Biola. The Destruction of the Canaanites, God, Genocide, and Biblical Interpretation. This is a quick overview of the different ways that Christian interpreters have approached the passages in the Bible that deal with the destruction of the Canaanites or the conquest. Let nothing that breathes remain alive. You know, those kind of seemingly genocidal passages that most Christians are embarrassed by in the Old Testament. Charlie did a great job in cataloging the different views, and he also does a good job in keeping his cards close to his chest. He does not tell you what his view is. He presents and surveys the different options that are out there. So if you're interested in the topic of the conquest, if you're an apologist, if you're an Old Testament researcher, if you're just interested in the Hebrew Bible, this is a great book to have. Next up, I've recommended it before. I'll recommend it again. I will always recommend it. Our friend Carmen Imes' book, Bearing God's Name, Why Sinai Still Matters. If you've watched this channel at all, this is a no-brainer. One that I recently finished. A classic that's been updated with a second edition, David De Silva's monumental work, Honor, Patronage, Kinship, and Purity. This is all about the background of the New Testament. This is a classic in the field and has just been updated just this year with a second edition that I believe David said it has about 25% more material added and revised and everything. So definitely check it out. My friend Esau's book, Reading While Black. Whether you are black, white, Latino, Asian, doesn't matter. This book is fantastic. It's just one of those books you have to read, especially if you're a white evangelical, which I am. Forget anything that you think it might be about. Forget the hot button terms that get thrown around like CRT or wokeness, or it's none of that. Esau is a solid New Testament scholar of the first rank, and he also writes with honesty and depth in a way that's incredibly moving about what it's like growing up in the black church and coming to grips with scripture and what he reads and how to read it. This came out at the height of racial tensions in this country, and a lot of people would dismiss it immediately because of all the other stuff that they think it's about without even reading it. Don't be one of those people. Read this book, Reading While Black. Esau McCaulley. Another recommendation, I'm actually about to start reading this, but the reason I'm recommending it is because I'm friends with the author. We went to school together at Gordon Conwell. Nijay Gupta's 15 New Testament Words of Life, a New Testament theology for real life. Nijay is a phenomenal New Testament scholar. He writes in a way that's accessible, but it's also academically rigorous. If you haven't read his blog, Crux Sola, you should go check it out. He's had some great discussions here on YouTube with Michael Bird. He was on Mike Winger's channel for the Passion Project, talking about the Passion Translation. Nijay's done a lot, and he gave me a copy of this book. I'm excited to read it. This is literally next on my list of books to read as soon as I finish one that I've almost done with at the moment. If you are a biblical languages nerd, or you just want to be a biblical languages nerd, you've got to check out the series by Glossa House. Glossa House has a series of illustrated books of the Bible. They're like graphic novels, but all of the words and all of the word bubbles are the original languages of Scripture. So all of Scripture, Old Testament, this is New Testament, so it's in Greek, but it's the same with the Old Testament in Hebrew. These are great if you're learning the languages, if you're a seminary student, or if you're just trying to keep your Greek or Hebrew sharp, because it presents the text and it gives you something visually to anchor these words and terms and phrases to that you're learning in your Greek or Hebrew class. Glossa House gave me a stack of them that are over here behind me. You'll be seeing these in a future Dojo Bible review video, but I wanted to put it on your radar. Glossa House, the illustrated books of the Bible in the original languages. And then lastly, Richard Middleton's Abraham's Silence. If you saw our interview here with Richard earlier this year, we had a great discussion, his view on the Abraham incident where God asked him to sacrifice Isaac and how Abraham responded versus how Abraham might have responded had he been more like, say, Job. Richard pushes against a traditional reading, but not in a way that's trying to come up with something new or sensational, rather in a way that takes the Genesis text seriously, as well as the rest of what we read in Scripture about God. The panel discussion on this book was great, and next time he's here in the dojo, I'm going to talk to him a little bit more about that. Okay, we have time for just a couple of more questions. What was the best new research, in your opinion, at SBL IBR this year? There was no way I could even scratch the surface of everything that was presented, and I'm not in a position to judge the academic merits of half of what I heard. But one thing that did interest me was the session I went to on the last day by my very first Greek TA and my very first class on my very first semester at seminary, Dr. Emmylou Grosser, who went on to focus her attention on Hebrew rather than Greek. She has come out with a new book called Unparalleled Poetry, a cognitive approach to the free rhyme verse of the Hebrew Bible. So I was able to hear Emmylou's presentation. My Hebrew is intermediate, so again, I could not engage with it at the level that she was speaking at, but I could grasp enough of what she was saying to know that it's pretty important if she's right. The whole concept is basically the idea of Hebrew parallelism. And anybody that studied the Hebrew Bible, you know that Hebrew poetry is parallelism. It's either bipartite or tripartite. And this has just been the dominant view of Hebrew poetry for like 200 and something years. Emmylou's book is challenging that and saying, actually, it's a little bit different. It's not just, when you look at Hebrew poetry, it's not just about these parallelisms. There's something more organic going on. So for Hebrew language nerds, that would probably interest you. Check out her book. It's being published by Oxford University Press, and I think it should be out soon. I'm not sure if it's out yet or not. I know you can pre-order it. Okay, 2 more questions. Viewer asks, how is one able to attend? Very simple. Become a member of SBL and then register to attend. It's just that easy. Lastly, what was your favorite moment? My favorite moment was probably dinner that I had on Saturday night. Carmen Imes, Nijay Gupta, Charlie Trim, J. Richard Middleton, all of us went down to the hotel restaurant, got a table, had some, I think I had tacos, some kind of tacos, I don't remember. And we just sat around and they were really good about letting me ask them questions. I was the only one there not a PhD, not published in academia, and I just got to ask them a bunch of questions that I had about biblical scholarship and SBL and IBR and how it all works. How are papers presented? How are they chosen? It was really good food, really good discussion, really good fellowship. And then afterwards, we all went over to the Baker academic reception, and Richard and Carmen introduced me to a number of people at Baker, as well as other scholars who have published through them. So it was just a great time of connecting with people. They were so great about telling everybody what I did and saying, oh, you got to see what JM does. It's this channel called Disciple Dojo. It's really cool. He's bringing biblical scholarship out to the masses. And they just couldn't have done better at making me not feel like an outsider at my first SBL annual meetings. So I really just want to thank Carmen, Richard, Nijay, Charlie, all the folks that really did make me feel like I belong there. It was wonderful. And that was definitely my favorite part of SBL. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this little peek behind the curtain. It did not scratch the surface of what actually goes on there. I'm already looking forward to SBL next year. I can't remember where they said it's going to be. I'll have to get on the website and look. But I can already tell it's going to be the highlight every year. I came back with probably 3/4 of what I will be reading in this upcoming year from that conference alone. So as I do, I will continue to share resources that jump out at me or that I think Dojo viewers would like to know about. So stay tuned here on the channel for more. We're working on lining up more interviews with scholars and authors who I met while I was out there. So there's some cool stuff coming up in 2023. Be sure to subscribe, click the notifications icon so that you don't miss any of it. Well, my hot tea is no longer hot, so that tells me it's time to wrap this video up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time back here at Disciple Dojo.